Do you write the story or your title first?
Oh, the story. You guys may know, title of the story is really kind of a suggestion that the author makes. The title is really regarded as a marketing issue. I think with the first book, Think of a Number, I had suggested any number of other titles for that. I remember putting together a list of 50 possible titles and going back and forth with my editor at Random House about that. I think the final one, the Think of a Number title, I think my editor I think that was one of the ones on the list that he had suggested. I think Shut Your Eyes Tight, I think, was my suggestion. Let the Devil Sleep was. Peter Pan Must Die came from my editor. So it goes back and forth all over the place. Definitely the story comes first, for sure.
Well, I have to say, if title is a marketing ploy, then Think of a Number was perfect because that caught my eye. I have to admit, I'm a numbers person. So when I saw that title, I thought, oh, I have to look at this.
All of the suggestions my editors have made over the years, I think, have been good ones. I know my first editor at Random House used to write these very long editorial letters when I'd send in the manuscript. I'd get back a letter with 200 suggestions. As far as I recall, I have taken just about every suggestion an editor has ever made to me. I think maybe I've been very fortunate. I mean, I think the editors I've had have been very bright guys. They've never suggested anything that I thought was dumb.
Well, that's good.
That's good, yes.
We have asked this question to quite a few writers. We find the answers interesting, especially when you're writing an ongoing series. Are your books character-driven or plot-driven?
It's difficult to answer because at different stages of the writing, it goes back and forth. I get a plot idea. When I was writing Think of a Number, the first idea I had for Think of a Number was a guy who has a kind of a shaky background, but has become quite successful. And he has a very good life and a very good reputation. Years back, there was some stuff in his life that wasn't necessarily admirable. And this guy, in his new successful life, is contacted by someone who seems to know something about his past that's a little bit shady or scary. So that was the initial idea for that first story. So you've got that guy, Mark Mellery, who starts getting these scary little communications from somebody who seems to know everything about him. So I had that idea. Then I'm thinking, okay, so that's essentially a plot idea. And I'm thinking, all right, so what would he do? Maybe he would contact the police, but maybe not the police. Maybe if he knew somebody. That's where the idea for Dave Gurney came from that. Mark Mellery is scared to death about what's going to happen to him. I want the detective to be very different. I want the detective to be very orderly, very logical, beacon of reason. And that became the core of Dave Gurney's character. But then I think, all right, well, Dave Gurney, maybe to round him out a little bit, maybe he should be married. We want to give him a wife who thinks differently from the way he thinks. If he's very rational and a little bit abstract, we'll give him a wife who's very immediate and more emotional. I guess what I'm saying is that the first thing with me would always be the plot idea. And then I have to wrap that plot with characters who can credibly make it happen. So those characters then start to take on emotional characteristics. They take on a certain color because I want the plot to be believable. In a way, yeah, it starts with a plot idea, but right away, the characters, their motivations, their emotional makeup starts to, in a way, take over a little bit. I don't know whether they're character-driven or plot-driven because once I have the notion for a certain kind of character with certain kind of motive, I start thinking of other things that character might do in the story. So those are plot ideas that are coming out of the character, even though the original character idea came out of the plot. To me, it's not a clear thing. It goes back and forth.
That's a different answer that we've heard. So that's great.
Well, I think it goes more in depth into the way that authors think than we've ever been privileged to hear before. Do you have any upcoming books or events to share with our listeners?
I'm working on a 7th book. If you want, I have probably about a 1-minute summary of it. Would you like me to give you that?
Sure. Oh, yes, please.
The name of the book is On Harrow Hill. By the way, the first 4 books had been driven by an idea, like Think of a Number, Shut Your Eyes Tight, Let the Devil Sleep, Peter Pan Must Die. The last 2 books, Wolf Lake and White River Burning, I decided I would use evocative place names to suggest a mood and maybe in a way broaden the appeal of the book a little bit. It doesn't seem to be necessarily a straight period detective thing. So at Wolf Lake and then White River Burning and the new one I'm working on now, I'm calling, at least I think I'm calling it On Harrow Hill. We'll see what my editor thinks. I'll tell you real quick what this one is. A fellow by the name of Angus Russell, a very wealthy businessman in a fancy community, is found with his throat cut. There are fingerprints and DNA from the scene, and they all point to the guilt of this guy, Billy Tate, who had a problem with and jailed for making terrorist threats. But the problem is that even though his fingerprints were found at the scene, the problem is that this guy, Billy Tate, fell from a roof and was declared dead the day before Angus Russell was killed.
Oh.
And this guy Tate's body was taken to one of the town's funeral homes. The cops can't figure out why his fingerprints would be at the scene. But they figure, well, maybe we better check at the funeral home. Maybe somebody somehow got some of the guy's DNA or from the funeral home and brought it to the crime scene to try to confuse the issue. So they go to the funeral home. They want to find out who had access to the place. The funeral director tells them that the body has been placed in a coffin. The coffin has been closed and locked shut. There's going to be a quick private funeral. The family requested no embalming, no service of any kind. The funeral director brings the cops to the room where the coffin has been temporarily placed, and they discover that the coffin has been broken open and Billy Tate's body is gone. After a forensic examination of the room and the coffin, the local police chief, who happens to be an old associate of Dave Gurney from his NYPD days, he calls Gurney and asks for his help. As he's explaining the situation, Gurney comments that it should be pretty easy to track down whoever stole the body. I mean, that's kind of a messy thing. Shouldn't be all that difficult to find whoever stole the body. The chief shakes his head and says, if it were that simple, I wouldn't have called you. I think the coffin wasn't broken into. It was broken out of.
Ooh.
So begins the case of the Harrow Hill murders.
Oh, that sounds really good.
Very intriguing.
When can we expect that?
I'm slow. I probably won't finish writing it until this October, which means that it'll be published sometime in 2020, but I don't have a pub date yet. The book has been acquired by my publisher, but I don't have a pub date yet.
Okay.
Well, we'll definitely look out for that. We will also share with our listeners your website. Would you mind telling us what that is? And then we will put it in our show notes.
Oh, sure. It's very simple. It's johnverdon.net. John Verdon is one word, .net.
Okay, we'll put that in our show notes so people can check out your books and any upcoming books that you have coming out.
Right, and keeping track of when the Harrow Hill murders will come out.
Oh, that sounds so good,
Yes.
John.
It really does.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very encouraging.
Well, we thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show today. We were so excited to finally get to talk to you.
I'm sorry for my inability to do it the normal way, but you guys managed to solve the problem, so that's great. Thank you.
Well, we had to chuckle because Dave Gurney is right up there with the internet and his cell phone and everything, and and John Verdon is not quite so in step with this technology.
Dave Gurney can do all sorts of things that I can't do.
I'm curious, is it more your location or is it just keep up with the technology?
I think it's my lack of interest in the technology, my lack of willingness to get involved in it. I mean, my wife and I are similar in that respect. I mean, I think our idea of modern technology is a microwave oven.
Nothing wrong with that. Sometimes I think we have too much technology going on. We become slaves to it. Like I said, thank you so much, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk to you maybe sometime in the future.
Your next book comes out, you have an open invitation to come in and tell us all about it.
Thank you very much.
All right, take care, John.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was two great interviews.
Yes, both Johns were very interesting people.
Yes, they were. It's very interesting to me to know how these writers come about, and John DeDakis and John Verdon come from completely different backgrounds and different geographical
backgrounds.
Yes. Two talented writers. We are very fortunate to be able to have them on the show for your enjoyment.
Yes, it was really great finding both of these authors and finding out about their books, opening our horizons to another couple of artists that we would not have.
Yes, and let you in on a little secret. John Verdon, how we ended up having him on the show is we were still doing our alphabet at the time, and he just happened to be a author with the last name of V, but we are so thrilled that we found him and look forward to anything that he writes.
Oh, definitely. I really like Dave Gurney and his cast of characters.
Definitely. That takes us to the end. And like always, make sure you check out our website at
www.itwasadarkandstormybookclub.com.
And there you can find all the links to our episodes. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can find our links to our social media. And make sure that you click on that Patreon button because there are some rewards in there for our patrons. We're hoping that you consider agreeing to be one of our patrons. No matter what, we appreciate every one of you that have hit the play button. Hope you agree to stick with us.
Oh, definitely. We love our audience, and we really want to produce a really good quality podcast for you. That means really good equipment, really good surroundings.
We are currently sitting under a blanket.
So we need to try to expand our equipment.
Definitely. It'll also give us the opportunity to travel to some events that we aren't quite in our budget right now.
So we can meet great new authors and, of course, wonderful readers.
And speaking of our listeners, we would love it if you would email us with any suggestions or your own reviews. This is not just us. We want it to be like a book club. We want everybody involved. We get tired of hearing ourselves talk.
Yes, we would love your participation and we would love your suggestions. Let us know what works, what doesn't work. We need some feedback.
Absolutely.
And remember,
life would be boring without a little mystery.
Bye.
Bye.